your API with ACB Dakota hosted it on our Twitch channel. If you have attended that Twitch, can you just answer that in the chat and say, yeah, you have attended it? Yes, no. Just I think for Rohan and Dakota to understand and see how many have already seen it there, and then we can do it. Okay, lot of no, so we have a lot of new audience, Dakota. Hey, Rohan.
Good. That makes me feel a little bit better.
No worries. You guys didn't miss anything. We are gonna catch up with everything that Dakota shared in there. So don't worry if you haven't attended that Twitch in there. Rohan, we couldn't hear you. Can you test it one more time, please? No, we can't hear you. No, nothing.
How about now?
There you go.
Hey.
That's pretty good.
Sweet.
And I will probably stop the video for those who are in India or from Maharashtra. Probably I am literally just returning from a Ganpati Visarjan. So that was all the rush that I was in. So I'm gonna stay off here. All right. I think we are
totally
2
fine.
minutes into it. Yes. So let's 58. I think it's time to start. We are 2 minutes into the event. I see a lot of people have already joined.
Yeah,
Okay to start.
Let's jump into it.
All right.
Welcome everyone.
All right.
Oh, sorry, Monique, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I know it's everybody's excited to hear what you are saying, so probably I won't take much time. But it's really good to be back on the online meetup. Good to see so many people here. Like I said in one of the social posts, we heard a lot about ACB in the Dreamforce, pre-Dreamforce, after the Dreamforce. A lot of good things are coming into ACB, and I think it's the right time, Rohan, now for us to learn more about how we can use ACB to architect our APIs, right? With that, Rohan, for you, I'm not sure if you have seen those responses, but not many attendees from this attendee group have attended that other session. So you can direct session whichever way you like, right?
Sounds good.
All right, with that, Rohan and Dakota, I think people are not here to hear me. So recording is started, screen share, we can see. Guys, if you can see screen well, or if you cannot see, please let us know in the chat and we will look into that. But Rohan, Dakota, please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today to our kind of series that we're doing, the ABCs of ACB, learning the basics of Anypoint Code Builder. We're doing a 3-week kind of sprint leading up to GA on October 16th, covering all the basics of Anypoint Code Builder. So we're starting this week with architecting APIs with Anypoint Code Builder. Next week, we'll be kind of honing in on how you can boost efficiency with Anypoint Code Builder plus AI with some of our upcoming features for Einstein for Anypoint Code Builder, which we'll release in pilot along with the GA of desktop. And kind of wrapping it up at the end of the, right before GA, we have connecting systems with Anypoint Code Builder, doubling down on kind of the integration aspects of Anypoint Code Builder and how you can kind of build more complex integrations with the tooling. So as you can see here, we have a nice little calendar kind of detailing all the different events. So next week, we're going to have a second follow-up meetup just focused on the AI features. It's going to be happening on the 4th of October, followed up by a Twitch stream kind of looking at that aspect as well. So tune in, join. We have the schedule all posted. This will be kind of circulated around social media so no one forgets, but we love to have you on, and yeah, we hope you're excited. So we are starting today with architecting APIs with Anypoint Code Builder, the first series of our 3-part series, and just kind of going over a quick overview of Anypoint Code Builder to kick us off. What is Anypoint Code Builder? Anypoint Code Builder is MuleSoft's next generation IDE for developing APIs and integrations. So Anypoint Code Builder, we're kind of changing things up. One of the big things we're doing is that we're changing the infrastructure that we're building Anypoint Code Builder on. So we're shifting over to VS Code, Visual Studio Code. This is kind of changing the game for us. One, it's going to let us have both a cloud and desktop IDE, which is really powerful. Visual Studio Code is one of the most, if not the most popular IDE among developers. So we're kind of meeting you where you are and giving you a place where you want to work. I know I've met with a ton of people from the community and a ton of customers, and a lot of them are using Visual Studio Code already. Super excited to have MuleSoft's IDE also available alongside that. Not only that, though, Visual Studio Code also gives you access to a ton of cool functionality. So you have the code snippets, which is really powerful. You also have things like extensions, and there's a lot of other features that are kind of built in there to just give you a very clean and powerful experience. We're also combining kind of aspects of the API and integration development lifecycle into a single tool. So previously with Studio, you kind of have to start Design Center to design your APIs, and you hop over to Studio to actually implement and build your integrations. Getting rid of that, we're giving you one single pane of glass. We're giving you one tool to do design, develop, test, debug, deploy, do everything you need to do for your API and integration design. So really consolidating that developer experience, making it more clean, making it more efficient. And then finally, we're starting to build AI into the tooling. If you heard at Dreamforce, we announced Einstein for Anypoint Code Builder. Einstein's gonna be there, your little buddy, as you design your APIs, as you build your integrations. Currently, we're going to be releasing a pilot, which will include generative flows that'll allow you to actually use natural language to generate integration flows. And again, if you want to learn more about that, check it out next week. It's super cool. The team's made some really good progress going through all that so far. All right, but today we're focusing on our kind of user journeys. Today we're talking about the first journey, which is design. We're going to be doubling down on how you kind of design your APIs in Anypoint Code Builder, going through some of the best practices, going through some of the use cases, and really drilling in on it. And just as a quick overview, some of the cool stuff that you can do, like I said, we're consolidating that experience, but with Anypoint Code Builder, you can start designing right from the actual tool itself. We currently do support both RAML and OAS 3, so you can actually author your API specs, both of those. We also have documentation that's able to be auto-generated, things like the built-in mocking service, which is also really cool. And one of the cool things that we're also doing that is newer is iterative scaffolding, the concept of being able to start designing your APIs without actually finishing the design phase, start your implementation right from the same sort of workflow, kind of streamlining that process as well, not kind of pigeonholing you into that. So there are a lot of cool aspects, some newer ones, some that you might be familiar with Studio, but all kind of wrapped in this new experience. And to take you through that, I'm going to pass it off to Dakota. Dakota, go ahead. You can take over, and he's going to dive into a demo.
Awesome. Well, that's a great intro. Thanks so much, Rohan.
Yeah.
Let me start sharing my screen here. Rohan, I think I might need you. Yeah, there it goes. I was like, uh-oh, something's wrong. All right, let's do it. Perfect. Should be coming through. Rohan, let me know if there's any issues, but I'm going to go ahead and jump into it. So like Rohan mentioned, Anypoint Code Builder, that's MuleSoft's next-gen IDE. We're focused on 3 main user journeys. We're going to be talking about the first of those today. Really where I want to start this demo is from the very beginning. I think the entire point of sort of this 3-part series is to introduce folks to Anypoint Code Builder, some of the use cases that we support, and just make it super easy for folks to onboard and really understand the product and its capabilities. So here I'm going to start out from my Anypoint platform, and you'll notice that we have a dedicated card for Anypoint Code Builder. If we want more information or to actually get started, we're just going to go ahead and click on this Get Started button. And this is going to take you to the landing page for the ACB product. And you'll notice that we have two different versions. We have Anypoint Code Builder, which is going to be our cloud-based IDE. And then we have Anypoint Code Builder for desktop, which is what's going to be GAing in October, around mid-October. So we're going to focus today's session on the desktop version just because that's what's right around the corner. And to do that, I just click this install button. And when I click that install button, it's going to redirect me to the Visual Studio Code Marketplace. And here we can view more information about our extension pack. So you'll notice the first thing, we're published under the verified Salesforce publisher. From here, you can view more information. I think really the important thing to highlight here is the prerequisites. Here, we list out your minimum Visual Studio Code version. Git is required to be installed on your system prior to downloading ACB. And then, of course, to access all of the features and capabilities that we're going to be going through, you should have an Anypoint platform account. So that said, I think the only other thing I want to highlight here is we do currently support Windows 10, Windows 11, Mac. Doesn't matter if you're using Intel or ARM. We support all of those right now out of the box. And it is currently in beta, so if you want to go out and test it in the next month before we go GA, by all means, feel free to do so. I think for anybody out there who's getting started, one thing to remember, the Anypoint platform accounts have a free 30-day trial. So it's always worth it to maybe create a trial, install the extension pack, play around with it a little bit, and see if it meets your business's needs. So that said, let's jump into it. I'm going to go ahead and swap my screen over here. This is Visual Studio Code. It's sort of a base instance, haven't really done anything with it yet. And I'm going to show you how to install the extension pack through VS Code. Now, if I wanted to do it from the browser, I could do that. I could click this install button. All that's going to do is redirect me into Visual Studio Code. What most folks will probably end up doing is actually coming into VS Code and clicking on this extensions icon here on the left-hand toolbar. From here, I just need to type in Anypoint. And in just a sec here, we should see our extension pack. Here we go. Let's try the first one. There it is. Cool. So this lists out all of the extensions that we have. There should be 7 of them. One thing to know, all of these are meant to work in tandem with each other. So definitely don't install like 2 or 3 of them and expect ACB to work. Install the entire extension pack, make sure to keep it up to date, and that'll make the process a lot easier. So I'm going to go ahead. Typically, once we go GA, you'll go ahead and click on this install button. But because right now all we have available is the beta version, one thing to keep in mind is I click this arrow here, and then I'm going to click on install pre-release version. Now, once we go GA, you can just click the install version, and that'll install like the latest stable release version. That's just not available today. So it's pretty quick. Mine, I think I have maybe a cache for this extension pack. When you go to install it, it's going to take a few minutes. Our extension sizes are a little bit large, but that's because we're bundling a lot of stuff already for you out of the box, and it just makes the process of installing ACB a lot easier. So things like our local runtime or Java, all of that's going to come pre-bundled with the Anypoint extension pack, so you don't have to worry about downloading those things separately. So if you install this for the first time, definitely don't panic if it takes several minutes to install. It's totally expected. But once it's done, you should have this MuleSoft icon here on the left-hand side of the page. So let's go ahead and click on that. I'm going to click on this home button. And this is the Anypoint Code Builder extension pack. And one thing I really want to highlight here is that we're working sort of side by side in your VS Code environment. So unlike Studio, which is a dedicated program that you have to download onto your desktop, you use that sort of separately from all of the other development journeys that you might be going through. Anypoint Code Builder is meant to be sort of ingrained into that system as well. So you have your Visual Studio Code instance with any of your extensions that you have installed, and Anypoint Code Builder is just an extension that's supplemental to all of those. It can be installed, uninstalled, and really it's just meant to be, just to work in tandem with what you already have going in your development environment. So from here, we can see our 3 user journeys on the left-hand side. The first is designing an API. That's really where we're going to be focusing today. But we also can see things around implementing that API, or maybe just developing integrations between my various third-party systems that my business might interact with. Here, we also have super helpful links to our documentation, tutorials. I encourage you, if you're new to sort of the MuleSoft product portfolio, or you just want more information about how ACB works in particular, definitely visit those links and go through some sample use cases just to help get you familiar with the product. So that said, that's the setup. That's sort of leading us into the fun stuff, which is the demo. So I'm going to go ahead and click on design an API. But before I do that, I'm going to show a quick thing here. Sometimes when you log in, or when you first install Anypoint Code Builder and you open up the MuleSoft extension, down here at the bottom right, you'll see that not logged into the Anypoint platform. And if you try to do a lot of things, it's going to prompt you to log in, because we need to, obviously, if we're publishing API specifications to Exchange, we need to be able to log in and know what organization we're publishing those specs to. So it's super important. If at any point you see that you're not logged in, you're going to want to go ahead, click that down there. It's going to ask you if you want to sign in. Just click on allow, click on open. It sort of redirects you to the Anypoint login page. Because I'm already logged in, it just signs me in right away. So that's just one thing to note before we get started here. So design an API. Let's do it. From here, we have 2 different things in this form that we can do. We can design an API spec. We can design an API fragment. Here's all of the different fragment types that we support. I think as part of today's demo, we're going to be going through a lot of use cases around API specifications, and just some of the various use cases that you might have, and how to accomplish them within ACB. So to start off, I'm just going to give this a name. So I'm going to do meetup _ demo. And here it's going to have me set my directory. If I want to change this, I can just click on the browse button, but my default directory will be fine in this case. And then here I choose my specification language that I want to start designing in. So like Rohan mentioned earlier, we support RAML and OAS. This is a great time to sort of highlight that the version of Anypoint Code Builder that I'm using right now is the beta version. So we might have behaviors in here or user experience things that will be changed when we go GA. And the reason I call that out is I think by default when we go GA, OAS will appear at the top of this list rather than RAML. So that's just one thing to note. I'll call it out as we go through the demo if anything's really going to be changing. To start off with, let's start with RAML. We'll dive into OAS later, sort of in our demo here. But one thing that we'll see is that we support business groups. So you can see that I have 2 here. If I jump back to my Anypoint platform account, this is pulling directly from my account. So this is why it's so important to sign in, because if I want to leverage my business groups, I can do that. And yeah, so just make sure you're signed in, and then your business group dropdown will populate based on what's available in your organization. So just for the fun of it, I'm going to choose my business group here, and I'm going to click on Create Project. This is going to create my API specification. And in just a few seconds here, the screen's going to refresh, and we could get started sort of with our empty RAML file. Okay, and from here, it's going to take a few seconds for everything to sort of boot up and load. So while it does that, I'm going to talk through some stuff and pull up some supplemental material here. Okay. The first thing I want to touch on is recommendations. So when you're working with your API specification, we're going to help you author that spec through recommendations as you're sort of typing and doing those different things as part of the design journey. So if I come in here and let's see here, oops, there we go. So I'm just going to create a new line, and I'm on Mac. So if I call out any commands, they're probably going to be Mac specific. In this case, it's going to be Control Space. You can see that it's giving me a list of options that I can sort of start doing with my API spec. So maybe I want to set my version, and I want to set this to version 1.0. And then from here, maybe I want to set maybe my media type, and I'll hit Control Space again. I'm going to choose Application JSON. And then maybe after that, I'll hit Control Space, and maybe I want to do my protocols. From here, I could do HTTP. If I do a new line, I can insert HTTPS. And you can see that these recommendations are helping me author my spec and giving me sort of autocomplete options as I'm going through that design process, just to make things easier. It keeps me from having to type a bunch of stuff out. Maybe I forget what protocols are supported, and so having that drop-down menu makes it super easy to say, yes, I want to support both of these. So that's just one thing. I think eventually our goal, instead of having to hit control space, eventually we would like for this to be sort of an autocomplete. So just as you're typing, those recommendations are popping up. But at launch, if you want to leverage this feature, you would hit control space. So that said, I have an API spec already authored. Folks who maybe have attended a meetup in the past or were at Dreamforce might be familiar with this spec. It's just a good one that I like to use as part of my demos because I think it gives us a good use case. So I'm going to paste it in. Really what this is, it's an API spec. It's got a few different endpoints. Really the whole goal is to deal with a contact object. You have things like your ID, your first name, last name, email, phone number, company. And what can I do with that contact object? Well, as part of this API specification, I have several different endpoints. I can retrieve a list of all my contacts. I can create a new contact using a post request. Or if I want to get more granular, I can use the ID for either retrieving a single contact or updating an existing contact. And as part of that, we just put all of this information into our API specification. And like Rohan mentioned earlier, we have dynamic documentation that gets built out, and that's through this API console icon right here. So if I click on that, you'll notice that it's automatically pulling in the information from my API spec to help generate all of the content that we see here. So we have our API title, we have the version, base URI, our supported protocols. We can see all of our endpoints. If I want to drill down into a particular endpoint, all I have to do is click on it. From here, I have more information about my post request. I have some examples, any of the parameters, what their data types are, if they're required, some sample requests, sample responses. So you can see here's what like a 400 would look like. Here's a 200 response. And then what's super cool is being able to test out this API through our mocking service. So without having to deploy anything, I can see how this API would behave based on different payloads. So if I switch this to the mocking service, and let's say I sent this example request, or actually I'm going to click on try it, make sure that the server is set to mocking service. Here's the request that I'm sending. I click send. Here, I would receive, if I sent this payload, a 200 success response. But let's say I make a typo in my request and I send it, then I'm going to get that 400 bad request error. So the API console, super cool. I think documentation, most folks tend to dread that part of the development process. And this just makes it really easy. And it's part of your design journey rather than sort of an afterthought after you've already implemented or developed your API specification. So super cool. That's what that icon does up here at the right-hand corner. So if you see that, that's what it does. Feel free to click on it, open it up, and you'll view more information about your API spec. Okay. So we have our API spec, and I'm going to walk us through the rest of our user journey here for designing an API. The next step would be to sync our changes with our version control system. So this is MuleSoft VCS sort of behind the scenes. And what's super cool here is once I commit these changes, they'll be available in my Anypoint platform account. So yeah, super, super great. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and click on the source control icon here on the left-hand side of the page. I'm going to give this a commit message. So I'll just say like commit 1, and I'm going to do commit and push. It's going to push this API specification. I'm just going to exit out of this. That shouldn't pop up once we go GA. So that's just one of those behaviors that should be a little bit easier once that stable build is out in October. So you can see all my changes have been committed. This has been grayed out. There's nothing new that needs to be synced. And really, once I've committed my changes, I can then publish my API specification to Exchange. And to do that, I'm going to be leveraging the command palette. I think before we do that, it is super important to sync your changes before you publish. If you try to publish before you sync your changes, you'll probably receive an error. So that's just a behavior that I want to call out in case folks are doing this and they try to immediately publish to Exchange. Make sure to commit first all of your changes so you don't hit that error. So to publish to Exchange, I'm going to use what's known as the command palette. So I'm going to hit Command-Shift-P, and it's going to bring up this drop-down menu. This is something that's native to Visual Studio Code. It's not something that we developed here at MuleSoft. You can see that it gives me a bunch of commands that I can basically initiate, and those commands would apply to my Visual Studio Code instance. So if I wanted to toggle between light mode and dark mode, I could do that. But what we've done at MuleSoft is we're actually able to add our own commands into this palette. So if I look for Mule, you can see all of these different commands are things that you would now have access to as part of this command palette. So here, in our case, we want to publish our API spec to Exchange. So I can choose that from the drop-down menu, and it's going to have me give my project a name, the artifact ID, the asset version, and the API version. So since this is our first version, I'm going to set that to V1. And then here at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, you can see that we're publishing this API spec to Exchange. I'm going to pause there. I think, let's see, is everything coming through okay? Yes. My screen just like flickered, so I'm not sure what happened. Folks can't hear me, let me know. But otherwise, yes, this should be publishing to Exchange. We can see that it's successfully published, and now it's asking me if I want to implement this API. So this will take us into that next step of the user journey. Basically, we've said, okay, I've designed my API spec, I've synced my changes to version control, I've published to Exchange. Now I'm ready to build out that backend logic for each of these different endpoints. So in this case, I would choose yes. I would give this a name. So let's just say meetup demo and implementation. Click enter, and I'll set my directory. By default, it's okay. And you can see that we're executing the scaffolding operation. So what this is doing is it's taking all of my API endpoints, all of that information from my spec, and automatically building out a lot of the XML code framework behind the scenes. So if you're familiar with Studio, the project structure for the implementation piece is going to stay the same. So if I want to view that XML code, I would just come to source main mule, and now I have my XML code here. From here, we have sort of our two different layouts. We have our XML code on the right-hand side, and then we will have our GUI or our Canvas UI on the left-hand side. And as you can see, all of this code has been generated based on our API specs. So it could be things like listeners, the different flows and subflows, and we'll talk about those here in a second. But first, I just want to highlight, I'm going to jump back to my Anypoint platform account. If I come into Exchange, we should see our API spec because we published it to Exchange. So here, I'm going to click on Meetup Demo. So our API is correctly showing up there. You can see that we created it under our business group, and that's reflected here. And we have our various endpoints here that we created. This is V1. Everything's looking good. So all of this is going to sync from Anypoint Code Builder back into Exchange. It looks like everything published successfully. And this just highlights sort of that journey that Rohan was talking about earlier of having everything sort of in a consolidated place, being able to design your APIs in Anypoint Code Builder, and then work on your backend implementation, and then ultimately go through with your debug and deployment if you need to as well. So we didn't have to start in Design Center or anything like that. We can do it all from ACB, and it still works the same way behind the scenes and gives you access to those assets in Exchange or through your Anypoint platform account the same way that you would use them historically. So from here, I could zoom in. The canvas is interactive. If I open up my flow list, you can see that we have different flows and subflows for each of the endpoints that we have. So we have our two gets, depending on if I want to use the ID or not. And then I have my post and my put request. If I wanted to do something here with my post, I can click on that. It's going to redirect me to my flow. If I click on these icons or my components, it's automatically going to highlight that section of the XML. And if I want to add any components, I can just click on the plus button. And maybe if I want to add like a logger, I could type that in and insert that component here. And we could see that we've inserted a logger. Now, we're not going to spend too much time on the implementation because really the purpose of this session is to focus on the design journey. And so this was mainly showcasing, okay, once that design has been completed, here's how you would implement that API and basically navigate around from there and start building out that backend logic. So that was sort of the end-to-end workflow of designing an API. Basically, we got our API in there, we synced it with version control, published it to Exchange, and then we implemented it. Now let's talk about, we're going to go a little bit deeper and talk about some of the other features that are available. And one of my favorite things, which doesn't yet exist or doesn't exist in Studio, that is sort of net new to Anypoint Code Builder, is iterative scaffolding. So let's talk about it and make it happen. So here, I'm going to open up my file tree. I'm going to close out this folder. I don't really need to save anything here. We're going to start from scratch again. Once again, I'm going to come back to the MuleSoft extension, and we're going to design a new API to see what this iterative scaffolding process would look like. So I'll click on Design an API. Once again, it's going to open up my form here. We'll give this a name. We'll say Meetup, and we'll do Scaffold. Perfect. And we'll give this a name. Now we'll jump into OAS just to highlight the fact that we can support sort of both languages. So I'll choose OAS 3 YAML. I'm going to click on Create Project. We'll give this a second to create, and then the screen is going to refresh. So historically, if you had your API specification, you wanted to make changes to it, you would basically open up your spec. You would make those changes. You would probably publish a new version to Exchange. And then if you wanted to build out your backend logic, you would then have to open up Studio, import that new version from Exchange. And it's sort of this very disjointed process. And it doesn't really lend itself well to just having a seamless experience between design and implementation. And that's where iterative scaffolding comes in, is essentially we can design our API spec at the same time we're implementing it, and we don't need to publish anything to Exchange. We don't have to pull in any new versions. It's all going to be done sort of automatically, and we can basically just work between the two work streams there, and it makes it super easy for us to sort of to do that. So I think the best way to showcase this is really to do it in person or do it live. So let's do it. I already have, we're using the same API spec. It's just been converted to OAS. So I'm just going to put some things in here that I've already sort of typed out in the interest of time. And should be good. Let's copy this in. New line there, and I think we're good. Okay, yeah, so once again, we have our base URL, we have our contact object, we have the GET request, and we have our POST request. Now let's say, let me open up, let's see, my documentation here. This is what it looks like. So notice how we don't have our endpoints for our IDs. So basically, if I want to update a specific contact or retrieve a specific contact, we haven't built those out yet. But we're going to get to them here in the future. So these are the two endpoints that we're working with. And maybe as a developer, I say, okay, this is a good starting point for me. I'm ready to start building out the backend logic. I sort of know what I need to accomplish. Let me go ahead and start working on that. Well, rather than syncing all of my changes to VCS, publishing to Exchange, and going through that workflow that we just did, we can actually click this icon here at the upper right-hand corner, which says implement this local API. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a workspace. Once again, this is a Visual Studio Code concept where basically you can have multiple projects open that sort of link together. So in this case, we're going to have our API spec project and our implementation spec both open under the same umbrella. So here I'm going to click OK. If you're using this feature, the one thing I recommend is when you're creating this workspace file, always create it in the parent directory of your API spec. So that's what I'm going to set here. I'm going to click Save. And in just a sec, it's going to build my API, and it's going to open up that implementation journey. And if I want to monitor my progress, I can go to my terminal. I can open up a new terminal, go to my output. Oh, it beat me to it. Okay, well, we'll close it out. In this case, we'll give it a name. So this is the name of our implementation project, similar to that last thing we did. So let's just do meetup scaffold implementation. Click enter. Here, the default directory is fine because it's going to sit at the same level as our API spec version or our API spec project. Here, we can see we're executing that scaffolding operation. And just to remind everybody, I haven't synced my changes. I haven't published to Exchange, but notice here in my file tree, I have my workspace open and I have my API spec and I have the implementation project open. So source main mule, open up that XML. I'm just going to enable that. And you can see here that we've automatically pulled in that API spec like we did in the past. We've built out all of that XML code, and now we can start interacting and building out that backend logic. But what happens if I want to add those two endpoints that we had before? Well, historically, I would have to publish a new version of that API and pull it in. But with iterative scaffolding, all we have to do is come back into our API spec. Here, I'm going to add in those two ID endpoints that we had. So let me scroll down here, and I'm going to grab those. And we'll put them into our spec. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to click save, and you'll notice that a few things just happened. We had yellow pop up all over the screen. So here on the left-hand side, we could see it. If we look at sort of our headers here, we can see it as well. And what this is saying is, hey, I've built out this XML code based on your API spec that you gave me. And then you change that API specification, and now those two are out of sync. So let's go ahead and update that XML code so I can continue with my implementation for those endpoints. So here, I now have access to a new icon that says rescaffold this API. And first, before I do that, if I look at my flow list, notice how we only have those two initial endpoints that we started with. But once I click this rescaffold button, it's basically going to rebuild. It's going to look at that API spec, rebuild it, and now it's automatically updated all of my XML code and generated all of the subflows for those two new endpoints that I just added. So here I can do my, here I can see my get with ID if I wanted to do that, or I can do my update if I had my put, and it's automatically generated this XML code for me. I haven't published to Exchange. There was no need to create a new version. I can start building out that backend logic for these new endpoints instantaneously with just the click of a button. So super cool feature. Like I said, it's called iterative scaffolding. So if you hear us refer to that or you want to play around with it, check the documentation. It's super neat. And from here, let's say I'm done building out my backend logic, the process would be the same when I'm ready to publish it. So basically, I can come to my version control. I can say commit 1, commit and push. Just escape out of that. It's going to commit my changes. And then as always, I can do Command-Shift-P and publish that API spec to Exchange. And notice this is V1, even though we've done a couple iterations on that spec, it's now ready to publish. We feel satisfied with it, and we can publish to Exchange, and that process works the exact same way. But it just shows that iterative process, the ability to stay in that work stream of, okay, I have an endpoint in mind. I know what backend logic I need to complete. Let me go build that out. Okay, now that I've done both of those things, I can work on a new endpoint. Let me go back to my spec, add that new endpoint in, jump back to my implementation, continue with my build out, and go from there. So yeah, from here, we can see that our API spec has been published to Exchange. So let me switch back over to my Anypoint platform account. Probably going to have to refresh this. And you can see that we have our scaffolded API here with our different endpoints. And remember, we built this out using OAS. We designed this for our root organization. So everything is looking good here. All righty. So those are the two main things I wanted to highlight, but I want to show you how to get started with a few of the other entry points for Anypoint Code Builder that you might be coming from. And that'll make sense here in a second. So let me just close this out, and we're going to start from scratch again. Close workspace. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about, what if you're already coming from Design Center? I think that's probably going to be fairly common. Design Center's been around for a while. Anypoint Code Builder is fairly new, but maybe you want to get started with Anypoint Code Builder and you have specs that you've already started that design journey with Design Center. Well, using our handy command palette, I don't need to click on anything. I mean, I could click on MuleSoft if I wanted to, but I don't need to click on any of our quick actions here. All I have to do is do Command-Shift-P, and we have a command for importing an API specification from Design Center. So all I would have to do here is if I wanted to continue building out that API spec, I could just click it. It's going to say, okay, which business group should we take a look at? I'm going to say MuleSoft. And before this meeting, I created one for us to use. So I can type in Meetup. And you can see that I've already created this API spec, Meetup Design Center. It already lives in my API or in my Anypoint org. So if I go back to Exchange real fast, Meetup Design Center, it's got two different endpoints just to get in a post. It's a RAML under my base org. I want to pull that into Anypoint Code Builder. So all I have to do is select that API spec. It's going to say, great, do you want to create a folder for it where we can store this on your local machine? You do, you say select target folder, choose your directory. It imports that API spec. From here, if I open up my RAML file, I can see all of that code that was already built out in the Design Center. So super helpful if that's just sort of your entry point into Anypoint Code Builder. You already have specs that you're working on. You could go ahead, pull those in. And then similarly, if I wanted to make changes, I can do that as well. So let's go ahead and add in those two other ID endpoints. I'm going to do that here, paste, save. And from here, I can sync my changes. So we'll say maybe second commit push. And now I want to publish this new version to Exchange. So it's going to increment that asset by 1 because I've already published sort of that first version. So if I do Command-Shift-P, publish API spec to Exchange, we'll keep the name the same, but notice how it's incremented that asset version by 1 because I've already designed sort of this first thing and published it. We need to go ahead and increment it. So it does that automatically detects that. So we can just click enter a few times and we can now publish this new version from Exchange or to Exchange. So we'll wait for that to complete. It's going to just take a couple of seconds and then we should be good to go. And the next prompt should be, do you want to implement this API? In this particular case, we're going to say no, just because I'm going to show you how to do a different way of implementation here in a second. So would I like to implement this? I'm going to choose no, but our API spec was published to Exchange. So now let's jump back. If I refresh this, we should see our two new endpoints, which appear here. All righty. So let's talk about the last thing that I have sort of lined up for this demo. I know we've covered a lot of content, and that is how to get started with the implementation piece if you don't build out your API spec in Anypoint Code Builder. So we talked about, okay, I have specs that live in my API designer. How do I pull them in and continue working on them? That's just what we took a look at. Now, if I'm ready to do my implementation, let's say I have API specifications that are already built out. I don't need to modify them. I just want to start building out that back-end logic. How do I get started doing that? So let's click on File, Close Folder, and I'm going to choose Anypoint Code Builder here. And this time I'm going to choose Implement an API because I already have an API spec that I want to build out my logic for. So I'll click on that. And we'll give this a name. So let's just say Meetup. And we'll give this, we'll just say implementation. Here, I can search for my API spec that I want to implement. So this is that next sort of entry point into Anypoint Code Builder. I'm ready to build out that backend logic. Let's take that endpoint that we just finished designing that we chose not to implement. Let's pull it in from Exchange and start that implementation process. So if you want to filter, you can click on this toggle. It'll give you additional filters. But what did we call that? I think it was Meetup Design Center. So let's just search for Meetup. Let's see what pops up here. Great. So we have this API spec. We can see that the version is 1.0.1. So that's the most recent version that we just published. And if I want to start building out that logic and implement it, all I have to do is click on this add asset button. It's going to add that there. And I'm just going to change my name to make sure it's unique here. Design Center. And I'll click on create project. And what it's doing is, rather than pulling from an API spec that I've designed in Anypoint Code Builder, it's just going to download that asset from Exchange, do all that scaffolding and building that XML code behind the scenes. And now you can see that I have my implementation project created. I can come to my source main mule, go to my XML. And as always, all of this is automatically generated from that spec that we just pulled from Exchange. So that would be your entry point into Anypoint Code Builder if you're more concerned with the implementation piece and building out that logic, and your specs are already designed. You don't necessarily have to start and go through a linear path of each of these 3 user journeys in Anypoint Code Builder. You can jump directly into implementing an API if you already have a spec that you've built out. So with that, yeah, I think we are good to go here. And then, yeah, that icon I just clicked, for folks who were curious up here, that's what's going to open up my GUI or my left-hand canvas view here. So if I close that out, you can see that if I click this icon here, it just opens up that split view. And similarly, if you accidentally close out your XML and you want to open it back up, you can click this icon here, which looks like a little code icon, and it's going to open up the XML pane. So with that, that's gonna wrap up everything that I had today. That was a lot of content that we went through. I hope it was helpful. I hope some of it was new. If folks have had experience with Anypoint Code Builder in the past, maybe you learned something new with iterative scaffolding, or maybe how to pull in some of your existing assets from Design Center or Exchange. I know we didn't touch a lot on the implementation piece of like that actual, like, how do I import my connectors? How do I add operations? That will be for follow-up sessions. So that's really the goal, like Rohan was mentioning earlier at the beginning of this, is we're going to have 3 different sessions with folks. So next week, I believe, is Mofi, and then it's Simone, and they're going to dive a lot deeper into these next phases or these next user journeys that Anypoint Code Builder supports. So with that, I'll invite Rohan to come back on, and maybe we could open it up to questions or see what folks have. I think you're on mute. Yeah, there we go.
I'm back.
Nice.
All right, let's go ahead and.
I think most of those questions Simone just used her ninja power and answered.
Perfect. That was the goal. Yeah, it's a good tag team of like, I can just keep rolling through the demo, and then she's handling the Q&A.
Yeah,
Cool.
there was one place for Zombie when you was showing the XML and the diagram view. If you can show that button again, like where was it? I think he might have missed it.
Yeah. Rohan, you might mind if I take over again? Yeah, let me share that. No problem.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, cool. So how to show the code view and the GUI view?
Yes.
So if it opens up and you're in your XML view, up here in the upper right-hand corner, you sort of have this like tree icon. That's what you click on. So if you click on that, it's going to open up the GUI. And if you close out your XML and you're working only in the GUI, we have this code icon, similar place, upper right-hand corner, but just looks like some code brackets. And if you click on that, that's what's going to open up your XML. So you can have them both open at the same time. You could close them out and open them, whenever is convenient. But yeah, just in case one accidentally gets closed, those icons in the upper right-hand corner will help you out. Yeah, cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, good question.
All right. Rohan, did you catch any other question in the chat?
There was one that I just wanted to address, I think, live.
Okay, go ahead.
Someone asked, can't even find the question anymore, but will Studio be end of life, or will they continue to coexist? The answer is short-term, Studio and Code Builder will coexist. Our long-term plan for Studio is eventually to sunset it, and Anypoint Code Builder is meant to be our next generation IDE. But in the short term, we will have both, and there will be a kind of very long kind of sunset for Studio because we know a lot of people are currently using it. But just to kind of level set, that's where we're at. And speaking of stuff happening in the next couple months or years, months actually, but here's our roadmap. Currently, we're gearing up for October, our desktop GA. And again, also those AI features. Again, if you want to learn more about that, we're going to be diving into it next week on the 4th and the 5th in a meetup and a Twitch stream. So come check that out. But that will be going out in pilot when we GA Anypoint Code Builder for desktop. So on the 16th, when we GA Anypoint Code Builder for desktop, we're also going to be pushing out the pilot for Einstein for Anypoint Code Builder. Looking a little forward into February, we're going to get a beta form of Einstein for Anypoint Code Builder generative flows. We're also going to get some configuration, some basic config through the GUI. So right now you can currently add components using the GUI. But we're also going to get a little bit of config in there. And then looking out a little further in the first half of FY24 and beyond, we're going to be GAing Anypoint Code Builder, the cloud version of it. So you'll have cloud and desktop, both GA'd side by side. We're going to be introducing MUnit. We know that's a big one for everyone, so we're super excited to get that out. And we're going to be adding in some advanced configuration to the GUI as well. So more functionality to the GUI, testing and kind of debugging support, and the GA of Anypoint Code Builder, and some nice generative AI functionality coming in. So lots to be excited for in the roadmap. We're super excited, and we hope you are too. And just kind of circulating this again, the ABCs of ACB. So next week, we're going to be focusing on AI. If you want to watch that Twitch stream, it's pretty similar to the content we went today, but again, it's stored on Twitch right now. So check out the MuleSoft community page to see that. But yeah, join us next week and the week after that to learn more about the AI functionality, to dive deeper into the integration functionality in Anypoint Code Builder. And yeah, help us, or just excited to kind of go on this journey with you guys to GA. It's been a long one, and we're glad you guys are sticking around for it. And yeah, thank you so much. I think we've answered a lot of the questions in the chat. Simone, again, ninja skills kind of jumping in there and answering all these questions is great. So thank you so much, Simone, our silent question answerer. And yeah, any last words, Dakota?
No, just super excited to be here. Thank you everybody for taking the time, for all of the excitement. I think this is going to be great. October's right around the corner, so I can't thank you all so much for just taking an hour out of your days to spend it with us as part of this session. And I saw some questions in the chat related to properties or how to do some of those other things in ACB, and I'd say definitely tune into the following sessions because those are going to highlight a lot of those capabilities. How to use secure properties, encryption, decryption, stuff like that. How to use properties in general if you're just using normal. How to reference them in the code, things like that. So yeah, just build up excitement for the following sessions over the next 2 weeks. Definitely stay tuned. It'll be new content every week. So hopefully nothing is too repetitive for folks.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And it looks like there's a lot of things in the box. So we are going to get so many gifts in the next 2 weeks. So that's good. So look at that, ABCs of ACB.
Yeah.
Whose idea was this to prepare this kind of view calendar? Is that you, Rohan? That's really
It actually wasn't me. I can't take credit. Someone else said it. I think we were just talking about it. We're like, we want to do something fun. We want to like engage everyone. And I can't take credit, but I can't remember who it was either. So I can't give credit either. We'll say it was a team effort, but
yes.
Yeah, I think I'm really into it. I think it's cool. I think it's covers all the basics, and we're excited to be going through it with everyone.
No, thank you. No, thanks both of you for sharing all this awesome content. Thank you, Simon, for helping all the questions in there. So that definitely helped everyone. Like Rohan said, we have 2 more events happening in next week and the following week. So do hop in there. We are gonna take a next steps. We looked at how do we architect. I think the next step then will be AI, connected systems, anything that you would want to do within ACP. That will be your sessions. So we do hope to see you again next event. Until that, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Rohan.